Hello, and welcome to your creative and magical life, which is hopefully your actual life, but is also this podcast, which explores the intersections of tarot, creativity, magic, anti capitalism, social justice, and all sorts of metaphysical and mystical stuff, all with the goal of helping you cultivate a life that sparkles with magic and creativity. I'm your host, Cecily Saylor. I'm a tarot reader, a writer, a steward of creativity. I'm a double Capricorn who worships birds and dogs and all of nature. And I'm the creator of Typewriter Tarot, a project that helps people unleash their magic and creativity. Welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's make some magic. Hello, creative spirits. Welcome to episode 2. In this episode, we're exploring the magician archetype, and I'll be talking with Jessica Jernigan, who's a freelance writer and witch. I'm going to introduce her in more detail in just a moment. But before we dive into this episode, into that wonderful conversation with Jessica, and before we get too deep in the podcast journey overall, and since we're talking about magic today in a big way, I thought I should take a little time to explain what I mean by the title of this podcast, Your Creative and Magical Life. It sounds cute. It sounds fun. I worry that it sounds like I just go around being like, that's so magical all the time. And I do say that sometimes, but usually with good reason. But despite what may be a cute or fun name, this is a serious question. I take this very seriously, and I want to try to articulate what the fuck I'm talking about. So, first, I want to say that I view creativity as an energy. It's the energy that made me, the energy that made you, the energy that made the mountains and the rivers and all the incredible beings that coexist with us on this planet. I believe creativity is a current that flows through the universe. And it's not a trait that we possess or we lack. It's not something we can have and then lose. It's something we get to have a relationship with. Some people may be more inclined to invest more of their life in cultivating that relationship, while others may be more inclined to invest in relationships with other things like friends or money or success, etc. I also think that creativity is a neutral energy. So, I mean, we can use it for good things for the benefit of the world. We can make things like books, art. We can create services that help people. We can create organizations or projects that are meant to serve others. But we can also use creativity to create things that are destructive, like bombs or giant highways that wipe out natural landscapes, or to create toxic pesticides that help agribusiness grow lots of food, but also destroy pollinator populations, et cetera, and leak into our water and poison us and stuff like that. So creativity isn't inherently good necessarily. We can use it in that way, but it's how we relate to it and how we want to use it and what we want to use it to do. And I also think sometimes it's a question of what creativity wants to do with us. I do think it's a two-way street, just like a relationship. We don't just get to decide how it's going to be. Creativity is going to bring us certain ideas because we feel, or let's say creativity deems us worthy or deems us a good fit for nurturing or stewarding that idea. And then it's a collaboration. You have visions, you have intentions, you do your work. Creativity continues to show up and reveal to you what it is you're making. And you just keep going from there until there's something new in the world that wasn't there before. I also think magic is similar in that it's neutral. It's a force that we can use for good or bad. We can use it to manifest incredible experiences, or we can use it to conjure demons. We can have a relationship with magic that's healthy, or we can have a relationship with magic that's toxic, or we can have a non existent relationship with magic. One thing that I'll probably continue to explore in this podcast over many episodes is the relationship between creativity and magic. I'm often wondering, what's the difference? Are they the same thing? Are they cousins? Are they partners? Are they twins? Are they besties? And you're going to hear from Jessica in just a moment as she responds to the same question. But as for your creative and magical life, what I mean by that in the simplest terms is living a life of enchantment, living a life that feels like it holds a great deal of possibility, living a life that you feel like allows you to create the things that are important and meaningful to you, and a life that feels like it can astonish you over and over again with its goodness or its sweetness or its wonder and its rewards. I should mention that I'm not formally trained in any particular kind of magic. So I am not an expert, but I am a human who was once living a life that felt very dry, very hopeless, very numb, very magicless. Um, and then became a human who's living a life that I feel like offers incredible things, incredible possibilities. Um, that it feels like a life that I get to co-create with the universe. I feel like I'm in conversation with something bigger than myself all the time, not every moment. And I'm certainly like, there's not sparkly magic in my life every moment, every day. I am sometimes a grumpy bitch who is focused on the wrong things, the things that don't really matter, the little dramas in my mind that I would do better to just let go of and move on from. So I am still human. I am incredibly flawed. But generally speaking, compared to how my life used to be, I definitely now have a much greater, more expanded orientation toward magic. And as I oriented more toward magic, my creativity flourished, or maybe the reverse happened. As I like opened up to creativity, more magic entered. Again, it's that chicken or the egg question that I'll continue to kind of play around with in these conversations. But I'm looking for magic all the time. I practice it. I've seen its fruits return to me in ways that are confounding and delightful. So, and this isn't an orientation of like toxic positivity, like, oh, just believe in the magic, hope for something magical. Magic is there. Just you just got to look for it. I don't say that to people. I just see this as that sense that you're in conversation with something that's bigger than yourself. If we're only in conversation with our own thoughts and our ego, um, and the little like inputs we get constantly from our computers and our phones and our televisions, and what other people are seeing in their computers and their phones and their televisions, it's just a narrow way of conducting the time that we have. So, um, yeah, I really invite people. I'm looking to meet people who are wanting to find their way toward that more expanded view. I believe that strong, solid magic is encouraged and enhanced by strong self-knowledge. So the more we know about ourselves, the more we know about what we want versus what the world wants us to do or wants us to be, the more we can create the clear intentions that can call magic forward. And magic can look so many different ways. Last weekend, I was attending a conference for writers called AWP. And the last 4 years, I've purchased a booth and I, put out my stuff. I make it look as magical as I can so I can catch the eye of those writers who are like looking for, that vibe. So one woman who came by the booth, we had a conversation. I offer these things called mystic messages, and they're basically an envelope with a tarot card and a corresponding poem that me or one of my collaborators, Claire Bowman, have written. And when I put them out in a booth like this, they're already sealed and they have different stamps on them and they're sitting in a box and people can like kind of shuffle through them and pull a card at random. So it's like a one card tarot pull where you get the card and you get the poem to help you interpret it. So this woman comes by, we're talking for a little bit. She's telling me a little bit about her life and her work and this spiritual awakening she had. And she told me that she'd been pulling the Hanged Man a lot. And she pulled it like kind of right before this spiritual awakening event happened. She pulled it later. We talk about the card. She buys a mystic message. She opens it. It's the Hanged Man. That I think is magic. Like that's the universe joining the conversation. I feel like some part of the universe was listening to our conversation, has been listening and watching along with her life and sending her this message multiple times, I guess, be a better way to say it. And then she gets it again with me as her witness. And we're both there knowing that she pulled that card randomly or some part of her intuition helped her pick that one card. There were not like dozens and dozens of the Hanged Man in that box. There were a few, and that's it. There were 160 messages, maybe three Hanged Mans. Another conversation I had last weekend, a gentleman comes by. He's got very cool tattoos on his arms. I'm noticing how some of them remind me of images in the tarot. And I'm like, do you work with tarot? Because these kind of look, and he had one that looked like basically the love child of the death card. It's like Grim Reaper and the Knight of Swords. The the Grim Reaper on a horse going really fast, which is what's happening in Knight of Swords. And he gets a mystic message and he opens it. He actually took it away first, but he came back and showed me that it was the Knight of Swords. And I was like, we were just fucking talking about your tattoo being Knight of Swords. And then we had a conversation about should he uh, be a poet at all? Should he conform to this kind of like academic world of poetry that he's been exposed to when he really wants to write like some crazy, weird ass poems? And I'm like, yo, the Knight of Swords is like, go do your thing. So that feels like magic. Another example, once I left an offering beside a river. And as part of that offering, I declared this intention to open myself. I declared my readiness for new forms and levels of intimacy. A week later, I went on the best first date of my entire life and began a beautiful new partnership that I'm still enjoying today, more than 2 years later. So magic reveals itself in so many ways. It reveals itself through timing, through encounter, through synchronicity, through opportunity, and through meeting you at your level of readiness and willingness and your desire as you make them known to the world. I believe that we further our magic making and we make more room for creativity when we do some or all of the following things. So this is a list of things that I think help us live in a more magical way. Exploring your spirituality, whatever that looks like for you, whether it's like the religion you came from, wondering like, does that serve me? Which parts of it serve me? Looking at other possibilities, trying to create a sense of spirituality that works for you, investigating and connecting with ancestors and the people who came before you, working with them, inquiring about them, getting to know them, asking how they lived and how you want to live differently, disrupting ancestral patterns in your line, healing ancestral trauma. The next one, examining our values and questioning whether our actions are in alignment with those values. What's most important to us? What kind of world do we want to live in? Are we taking action toward that goal? Doing the hard inner work of unlearning so many of the things that toxic systems like capitalism, colonialism, white supremacy, and patriarchy have implanted inside of us. The unlearning, the unlayering, that will help you make your magic. Being in right relationship with the land and the beings that live alongside and amongst us. This too will enhance your magic. following our strange callings and our desires, especially when they are nonconformist. When we choose ourselves over the illusion of fitting in, magic will support you. That's what I believe. Here's another one: alchemizing and honoring our emotions, expressing our feelings honestly, and bearing witness to the emotions of others. I have a spiritual teacher who said to me once, spirituality is basically just alchemizing feelings. And I was like, oh shit, I think that's true. When we're suppressing our emotions, hiding them away, not showing them to people, saying we're fine when we're not, there's like a huge energy block. Something is out of alignment. Our magic will be off. Healing our trauma will help us make better magic. Building genuine and meaningful community will help us make stronger magic. Allowing ourselves to change and evolve is almost the same thing as magic, perhaps. I don't know. And then accepting that life is a mixed bag. Great stuff is going to happen even as your life gets better, even as you feel better, even as your relationship with yourself gets better. Life will still be hard. We're still going to have to deal with some shit that's going to be scary and terrifying and painful. And it's a question of how do we show up for that? How do we look for the magic in the midst of so much that seems wrong? And that's a big question that we're going to explore in this podcast over time. But we are complex, vast creatures, and everyone around us in the universe on this planet is too. And the more we kind of wake up to the fact that we're all connected, we all share the same origin, which I think of as the creation, the more we acknowledge that and respond to that in our lives, the more we just get to participate in the magic of that. That's what I think, for what it's worth. Um, I also, at this conference that I was at last weekend, I put out a typewriter because we're typewriter tarot. And also thank you to Michael who brought me that tarot, that typewriter as a surprise. I rode from the airport with a friend who I didn't know was going, but I ran into at the airport. And then we were on the same flight. We got off the flight. This friend's like, "Hey, I'll get a car. My university's paying for it anyway. Ride with me." Like, great. We go to the convention center. He's meeting up with an old friend from Kansas City where the conference was being held, someone I'd never met before. We hang out for a little while going through the registration line. They come by my booth as I'm setting it up. And then the next day, Michael brings me a typewriter, which looks like identical to the typewriter I actually own, but that I did not travel with because the typewriter is heavy and I already have to bring a lot of stuff. So that was another magical moment where someone just brought me a typewriter and I put it on my table and I asked people who came by the booth, how do you experience magic? And then some folks typed out what they said on the typewriter. And I'm going to read you some of those responses now. And then the interview will start, I swear. Okay, here's what they said. Magic always happens when there is poetry around. I can feel my dead husband sitting beside me on the couch. Magic is when you create something that didn't exist before. Magic is when I share breath with my twin baby girls. Magic is the love of my closest friends. I experience magic through community. I experience magic as energy. Magic is the turbulence of being human. Magic is the stars showing up in our lives. Magic is everywhere you dare to look. Magic is when my cat meows back at me. Magic is watching the stars until they move on their own. I experience magic when I write poetry. Magic is when I can feel the breeze through my curls and beneath my skirt, fluttering and becoming one with earth. Mm. Thank you to all the folks who shared their impressions of magic. If you're listening, I appreciate you. So there you have it. a rather vast, sprawling answer to a rather vast, sprawling question, but it's a question that I hope you will continue to ask yourself. What is your definition of creativity? What's your definition of magic? Feel free to write me and let me know. Now, let's dive in to this wonderful conversation with Jessica Jernigan about The Magician. Jessica is a freelance writer whose work has appeared in The Rumpus, Bitch Magazine, Electric Literature, Carcass Reviews, and Women's Review of Books. She has published fiction in the journals Conjunctions, Non-Binary Review, and Rose Red Review. She also writes book jacket and marketing copy for Harlequin, one of the largest publishers of romance fiction and the largest publishers of female writers. Jessica has also worked as a bookseller and editor. She currently hosts 2 Substacks, both on witchery, magic, folklore, and aging. One is called Postmodern Witch, and the other one is called Croning. I subscribe to both and recommend them highly. In conjunction with these projects, she also has been publishing zines on many of the same topics. And I love her zines. I buy them all. She has one on Baba Yaga in her Croning series, and she has one on Samhain and Imbolc in another series around the Wheel of the Year. Definitely check those out. For this interview, Jessica holed up in her bathroom to insulate herself from other noise in her home. And we had done a lot of the interview already. We had reached like the hour mark that I had scheduled with her, and I hated to keep her in the bathroom longer than necessary. So I ended the interview before I asked one key question, the question that I've been rambling on about so far in this episode. I wanted to know what were her thoughts on magic and creativity and the difference between the two, or the relationship between the two. So she very kindly sent me a voice memo responding to that question, and you're going to hear it first, and then the interview is going to start. So I hope you enjoy it. Stick around to the end for a creative prompt to work with the magician. I'll talk to you then.
The fundamental connection between magic and creativity is that both involve, bringing something into existence that wasn't there before. And I think we touched on this a little bit maybe, but I also feel that both ask us to get out of our own way and kind of let things happen. I talk about non-attachment a lot with clients, especially tarot clients, especially when death comes up. And I really do think that setting an intention is important in doing magic or in doing, visual art or writing. But we also have to be willing to let things happen and let things be outside our control and be open to, a result, a product that isn't maybe exactly what we were looking for. The last time I really felt this in a creative project was making a 50th anniversary gift for a friend. She is a paper mache artist, and she has written a book about paper mache, and I made a project that's from her book as a gift for her. And I don't do paper mache. I haven't touched it, since grade school probably. So this was a medium that I don't know much about. I was trying something totally new, and knowing that I'm not an expert at this technique, knowing that I'd never tried this particular project before, I didn't have a lot of ideas about what it should look like when it was done. I didn't even know if I'd know when it was done. And I had so much fun making that, and it was really satisfying, and she loved it. And I think the key there was that I was engaged in the process rather than thinking about the product. And I think that a lot of magic works the same way too. And I don't mean this in like a be careful what you wish for, horrible monkey's paw kind of way. I don't think that the universe is going to turn my desires around into something horrible. But I do think that we need to be willing to make space for and to appreciate things that are outside our control when we're doing something, when we're making a spell, doing magic, or when we're doing any other kind of creative work. I hope this helps.
Welcome, Jessica, to your creative and magical life. I'm so glad that you've come on to the podcast to talk with me about The Magician. Welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Well, to start, let's make sure our listeners know a little bit about you. Will you talk a little bit about you and your creative and magical life? What is it comprised of?
Sure. I guess the main things that feel magical to me right now are working on zines with a bunch of friends, also creating some zines on my own. I also recently shut down my tarot business because it was feeling stagnant, and I have kind of reinvented that as a couple of Substacks. Um, there's still a tarot component, but I just needed to like stop everything and start all over again.
I celebrate that choice. It's hard to shut things down sometimes. And I have been loving your Substacks. I learned about you recently as they were getting going. So it's been really rich and exciting for me to read your work there. And yeah, I wanted to bring you on to talk about the magician, though I wasn't exactly fully entirely sure why that card and you. I mean, though some things about it were totally obvious. You're a tarot person. You identify as a witch, and witches know about magic. So it wasn't completely illogical, but something pulled me in that direction. And I sent you an email out of the blue and invited you to do this. And after the fact, I was thinking, like, the magician, like, she's going to be like, that's so obvious. I talk about the magician all the time. I don't want to. But you wrote back and you said you were actually working with the magician and you had the magician on your altar. So there's a little magic to begin with. Also, when I was connecting to start the interview with you, I could hear the crows in my neighborhood starting to come in
Oh,
this direction. I've recently lured them to the backyard with some mealworms, and I had three on the fence
nice.
yesterday. And I heard them for the first time today as we were getting on. So I attribute your magical presence to that. But I wonder if we could co-teach a little bit about the magician and just kind of talk about maybe, first of all, what this card looks like and some of the meanings and associations you have with it.
Sure. I mean, if we're just like, I assume we're talking about the Smith weight. That's a good place to start,
We
right?
could start there.
Okay, yeah. So in the most archetypal, most familiar version of the magician, we see someone with a wand, which is something we associate with magicians. But also he or they have laid out in front of them all the tools of tarot. There's a cup, there's another wand, there is a pentacle or a coin, and oh my gosh, what am I missing?
The sword.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we all like to forget about the swords when we can,
Yeah,
don't we?
we do.
Yeah,
Yes.
we do. But anyway, so this is someone who has moved from, like, we've gone from the fool, who is just a total beginner. And for me, the magician is someone who is starting to make things happen in the world. And the magician's place between the fool and the high priestess um, is interesting to me because this is someone who is, like I said, making things happen in the world. The high priestess is interested in knowledge for its own sake. You know, she's kind of, they're kind of reaching out into the universe for cosmic wisdom. But the magician really wants to manifest things here and now. So that is one of the places where I land with the magician. This is someone who is making things happen in the real world, things we can see, things we can touch.
Yeah, I recorded the High Priestess episode before this one, actually, and it got me thinking, like, what if the High Priestess came before the magician? What if the knowledge or the knowing came first? And I was kind of like convinced of that idea for a second, but then I realized like we kind of have to act to know or to grow, like without testing things, without doing and like seeing how they play out in the real world. Our wisdom's kind of, even though the high priestess doesn't do a lot. Um, but yeah, so I like what you're saying about the action is really important.
Well, and that's an interesting framing because, I imagine that if the high priestess comes first, that to me is someone who is acting, when they act at all, with intention, with wisdom. But we have to work to earn that, right? Like we have
Mhm.
to experience the world to do that. The magician is kind of a toddler on this journey.
Yeah, just kind of testing things out, though honing their magic as they go. And I wonder, how do you define magic? What separates magic from just action?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question. My favorite definition of magic is Dion Fortune's, and it is magic is the art of changing consciousness at will. I love that because that is about what happens inside of me, right? Like that is about me and my relationship to the world. And I feel like that is something over which I have, some control. And I feel like the world becomes more magical when I choose to see it that way.
Yeah, I find that to be true as well. And it seems to be, it's kind of hard to define and pin down, even though it also feels kind of simple at the same time. And it does feel like a way of approaching things and how you do things, but it also seems like a point of view or like a perception that you adopt to engage with the world. And I guess, or the advice I give people or the way I try to explain magic as a set of steps is sort of like, you need to clarify your intention or what it is you want or your vision. And then there's ritualized action where you're focused on that intention and doing some kind of symbolic set of steps that can be like one step only, or could be like 25 steps if you wanted to get really elaborate. And the maintenance of like belief in the magic as you go, and then the maintenance of belief when when your actions have finished, and then the kind of maintaining that perception of looking for the magic without too much attachment to how it's going to show up. What do you think about that? Or how would you revise that?
I have a few things are coming to mind. One is that I want to be really clear that I'm not like the secret, we create our own reality kind of person. Like, there are lots of things outside our control. Um, and I feel like that sort of thinking is easier for people with a lot of privilege than it is for people who are, facing systemic challenges. So, when I say that, I have some control over my inner world and how I engage with the outer world, I'm very conscious of the fact that that's not everything. Like I don't think that I'm creating my own reality. I just want to
Right.
be super clear about that. But I like what you just said. I like the idea of, I'm hearing you say belief. And for me, like a real jumpstart in terms of my work with magic came from a year in which my best friend and I decided we are going to engage in willing suspense of disbelief for a year. We're going to go throughout the whole magical year, and we are going to do this with sincerity and with intention, and we are going to believe in it. And we're both, she's a doctor. We were both religion majors. Like we come at a lot of this material from a very sort of scholarly academic place, and we just decided several years ago, this year we're just gonna do it. We're gonna be witches for a year, and for both of us that turned into being witches. So I mean, and that, like getting back to what Deanne Fortune says, I mean, that was changing our consciousness at will, right? Like this was changing how we see our own lives and our relationship to the universe. And, we both came out of this experience of following the, wheel of the year, ready to keep doing it.
I love that. I'm really curious. Is there, do you have a memory that stands out in that year that really surprised you? Um, or yeah, like where you're like, okay, I'm in it. I'm sticking with
You
it.
know, I think during that year might have been the time where I started to notice my physical responses to writing. Um, it's where I really started to consciously notice that when I hit a writer's block, I feel it in my whole body. Like it is a physical sensation. And when I get beyond that impasse, it is a incredible rush of, it's an incredible release. And if I stay in that, I am just kind of surfing on a, river of words, right? Like and this is the place where, you know, my work is good, it feels good, and I feel like I'm tapping into something either beyond myself or something that I can't usually tap into within myself. And I think that thinking about witchcraft, taking it seriously, helped me to identify that and really think about what it means for my own writing practice.
I love that you, yeah, brought it to the page and the creative act. And I'm wondering, did something change for you where the writer's block was something you could work with differently? Did you find a different path to like shifting that or getting back in the flow? Or was it just this realization that writer's block is a full body experience?
Yeah, I don't think that it helped me. Like I don't think I've developed any new tools since that realization. I've just become better able to see it when it's happening. And I guess the tool is recognizing that it's happening, right? And rather than just trying to like beat my head against that wall, I, get up. I, do something else for a little while. Like I try to, and then I try to get back to work. So yeah, I guess to the extent that I learned anything new from that I mean that's kind of it. That like when I feel this in my body, it's just gonna get worse, and I'm not gonna fix it unless I get up and move and just let that go for a little bit.
Yeah, and that kind of, I think that brings up another, what I think is an important aspect of the magician, that magic making or participating in a magical kind of process or imagine magical thinking or perspective, I guess, is an embodied experience. Like if you are
Mm-hmm.
going through a ritual, your body must participate and you do something to synergize your mind and your body so that like the feeling of the future, I suppose, that you want to attract And I'm with you. I don't think we can magic our way to like having an individually perfect life inside all of the toxic systems that are pushing against us. And I don't think that people who are particularly and especially affected by those toxic systems are in the easiest place to start making magic, right?
Right.
But I do think magic is available to everyone. Like it's not something that like certain people can't ever possibly use. That you might have to you might be a person who needed to change something. Like I don't think Donald Trump is like set up to start making magic, but maybe he's been making some crappy kind of magic for years. I don't know. I don't know. Um,
I hear what you're saying, and I will say that a lot of my learning over the past several years has involved recognizing cultural appropriation, which in within the worlds of magic and witchcraft, and also learning about indigenous people who are sharing their own witchcraft and people coming from their own traditions, and sharing what they know. And this is not, I recognize that this material is not always for me, which is fine, but I love to see it. Like I love to see people sharing what magic means to them.
yeah, absolutely. I think, we're looking at or we're starting with the magician and the Smith Waite deck, which is a white representation and also the descendant of, Western European thought and folkways and philosophy at the same time. And so that's like a certain frame around magic, but there's so much more to magic. Like magic goes by many other names in many different cultures, and there are ways to use or engage with magic that, like hundreds of ways that I have no concept of and have never been exposed to. And they are just as magnificent and powerful, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say about that is that yes, the Smith Waite deck is very much informed by Western ideas of esoteric wisdom and whatnot, but also Pixie herself, Pamela Coleman Smith, she was Jamaican, or of
True.
Jamaican descent. And I feel like, especially when I look at some of her other artwork, I feel like she did slip some of her own magic, if you will, into that deck.
Yeah.
Um, One of my struggles, well, it's not really a struggle anymore, but my introduction to what tarot meant, was in the 80s. First deck that I bought, and the only guide that I had was Waite's pictorial key to the tarot, which is just it's just awful. Like if you're looking for magic, that is the worst place in the world to look for it. Like he really turned me off tarot for a really long time. But revisiting the artwork, with feminist tarot and queer tarot, as part of my brain now, it's a very different experience. Like whatever Arthur Waite meant, it doesn't matter anymore. Like I get
Yeah.
something else out of those images.
Yeah. And I think that's such an exciting thing about tarot, or one aspect as my practice or my relationship with it has evolved, that it is so, you can make it so personal, and your relationship with your deck or your decks is your own, and you and your intuition are, and your lived experience and, your perceptions and all of that feed into the way that you read. And every reader gets to like bring that particular like unique combination into the process. And I think it's kind of awesome and great that you came into tarot in the 80s. And I'm curious, like, what would be like the cliff notes of your evolution with tarot over the years?
I think I probably bought a tarot deck because I was inspired by the myths of Avalon, which is now a hugely problematic text. But I was inspired by the myths of Avalon to like look into feminist spirituality, or feminine spirituality as a, when I was 14 or 15. And that is, it led me to a variety of Llewellyn texts that didn't really help me much, but it also led me to Starhawk. So that was pretty huge. And like I said, my first experience with tarot involved me setting it aside for quite a while because there really were no resources that spoke to what I wanted from it. And what Arthur Waite saw in these images was not at all what I saw. So I think, I picked up tarot again for real maybe 15 years ago. So, I mean, there was a really long period of time where I just wasn't into it. And I cannot tell you what inspired me to do that, but I suspect that it was stumbling across, something, some article written by a feminist who used tarot or written by a queer who used tarot. And that made me realize, okay, there's a tarot, the world of tarot has moved on since, Duran Duran was topping the chart. So
Yeah, there's it's been really I didn't I came to it late in my life and have only had I guess like a 7-year relationship with it. And even just in that time, seeing, that was at a time when tarot was becoming even more mainstream and you saw more of it on Instagram and all of that, but it's continued to really blossom and so many different interesting, amazing people and creators and thinkers are working with tarot and providing new, like creating all these different windows, I feel like that we get to look through to engage with it. And that
yeah, it's
really,
cool. And I feel like we kind of rode a wave of, Sephora selling tarot decks, and we have calmed back down into a place where I don't care if people are serious about tarot or not. I'm not going to tell anybody how to do tarot, but I feel like we've gotten to a place where we can just get on about our business without it being, a cultural phenomenon, which is kind of nice.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I brought in a few different quotes about magic that I gathered, and you've established your favorite. So I don't know how you'll feel about these, but I wondered if I might share a few and see what they
Sure.
elicit for you, or any like, how you would spin it. So Brianna Saucy in her book Making Magic says, "This is the real gift of magic. It reveals possibilities and potentials that were previously thought to be unreal or impossible. It restores our sense of sovereignty."
I love that. I mean, sovereignty is something I talk about a whole lot, with clients. Like that is, I mean, it comes up in particular with certain cards, but that regaining one's sovereignty or acknowledging one's sovereignty, that's huge for me. Like, I love that. And it's one of the things I like to help people do with tarot is figure out what they actually want, and figure out how, like, really want, not what they think they're supposed to want, or what other people are telling them to want, but what they really want, and helping them sort of see a path towards that. And sovereignty is just a huge part of that.
Yeah, I noticed as I started reading more for people that something I would say quite often, and usually people who sit down for a tarot reading with me are women. And, I think women have a harder time remembering this. But one thing I would say often is like, it's kind of like, it felt like I was reminding them and myself at the same time that they have free will, like they have agency. And yeah, cutting through the like what you should want, what you should do toward this question of like, what do you truly want? And what could it look like to move in that direction? And I think the more we that's something I advocate as well, is like I think the better we know ourselves, the stronger our magic can get, as in we can astonish ourselves with some of the things that come into our lives. The more we kind of unpack and unlayer and unlearn things that we were programmed to, take part in or believe.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that I tell new clients always is tarot cards are pictures printed on paper.
Yeah.
Like they're not a substitute for your free will. They're not a substitute for your good judgment. Um, they are tools for reflection, and that's how I see them. That said, there are times when I'm reading tarot, much like there are times when I'm writing, where I know that what I'm doing is right. Like, and that's where, like, I just feel it and I know it and I don't know where it's coming from. And I'm again tapping into something that is beyond me or that I don't usually have access to. So, there are times when it definitely feels like magic.
Yeah. Do you feel like working with tarot changed your relationship with your intuition or showed you new things about your intuition or deepened that connection?
Oh, for sure. I think working with other people, making it a conversation has definitely opened things up for me. I mean, one of the things I like about using it for myself is it pushes me to think about things that I wouldn't maybe think about if I hadn't seen it in the cards. Like, we all have the little hamster wheel in our head or the, tape on loop that is the stuff we're always anxious about or always obsessed with. Maybe I'm overgeneralizing. Maybe everybody else doesn't have that, but I
I
have it.
think you're
And
onto something.
so, right, yeah, tarot cards can like stop that. Like they can push us, give us a way out of that. Like give us a way to think about things the way we wouldn't have thought about them before. And I definitely think that working with other people and getting that, getting feedback, getting positive feedback has given me a lot more confidence, in a lot of areas of my life and work.
Yeah. I think like the more I worked with them, it just gave me a dedicated space where I think my intuition was like, I can show up here and I can talk to her here. Like it opened that channel every time I would, not like every time my intuition was like blowing me away or,
Right.
whatever, but at least every time I sat down with it, like my intuition would automatically participate in some way. I started
Hmm.
learning, I'm not the kind of person who's like, I don't hear voices in my head. I don't see visions. Like I don't get information in an extrasensory obvious way kind of thing. But, I would find when I was reading for other people that things would come out of my mouth that I was like astonished by. I was like, did I just say that? And
Right, right.
and I would get goosebumps to tell me that like it was really true. Or when they would say something, I would get goosebumps that felt like, oh, this is important. Um, so yeah, it really kind of like created a telephone line or something. I think that has been super helpful. And I'm curious, since you are such a writer, you are a writer, you've written a lot of in a lot of different venues, in a lot of different modalities. And I'm curious what tarot feels like for you as a writer or what it adds to your lived experience. Because, yeah, does that question make sense yet?
It does. It does, but I think it's easier for me to answer it the other way around.
Okay.
I am a very writerly tarot reader. And in fact, one of the things that happened when I shut down my business, my previous business, like one of the things I realized that I kept trying to push myself to do one-on-one in-person readings because that was what a lot of people wanted. And I'm not good at that. Like I just had to acknowledge that I'm not good at that. Like sometimes I'm on fire, but I can't tell when that's going to be. I can't make it happen. And a lot of what I bring to the process that I think is valuable and different is, scholarship. It's knowledge of world religions. It's like cultural stuff. So, if I am doing an in-person reading and I think, oh, this reminds me of an episode of 90210, or this reminds me of a lyric from a Prince song, I can probably be on top of that. But if I'm like, this reminds me of something from the Icelandic sagas, and I can't remember, like, I need to look that up. Like, I need space to process that. And I need to be able to research, like any tarot reader, I have basic meanings of each card, in my head, but that is not what is interesting to me. Like, what is interesting to me is the interplay of cards with each other and cards with people. And I need time and space to do that. Like, I need to be able to do that in a writerly way. And so what I do is distance readings. People get a description of their cards, like, basic information about the cards, but also the story that I see in these cards talking to each other. And it's, several pages long, and there's a lot that goes into that I can't do, like, sitting at a bar,
Mm.
like, in 20 minutes. Like, I can't, I've tried to do it. And like I said, sometimes it works out well, but I don't know if I can, I can't say what I'm going to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, So, and if I have time and space, I can step away, or I can, that thing in that biography about Marcel Duchamp, like, I can find it, right? Like, and that, I think, is what differentiates what I do from what a lot of other tarot readers do, and it's what makes it interesting for me.
Yeah. That's important. It's quite a conjuring, I guess is the word I will use when you're reading for someone. It's a great, like you're synthesizing a lot of information from the cards, from inside yourself, from your intuition, from what you're getting from the other person. And yeah, when you're one on one, it's like all in the moment. It's really like, it's kind of like I imagine what surfers have to do or something like
Right.
really, really be attuned and like ride the wave. Um, so I think that's beautiful that you're like switching into a mode that really serves you and lets you kind of like dork out in the ways that you want.
Right.
And I
Right.
relate. I cannot recall something on the spot when I like feel like someone's watching me. I just like it doesn't go well. So how about another quote? This one from the goddess Rachel Pollack, who wrote in 78 Degrees of Wisdom. The magician not only uses the physical world for his magical operations, but he also creates the world in the sense of giving life a meaning and direction.
That one's interesting to me, in part because I don't feel all of it. Like, I don't feel the magician, to me, does not give things meaning or direction. For me, the magician, and we're talking about magic, like, this is a definition of magic.
Yes.
In terms of the magician, like, that is a person who is still, for me, operating from a lot of id. The fool is pure id. And for me, the magician is id with some skills in their back pocket, right? Like, that is someone who it's as we discussed a little bit earlier, it's when you get to the high priestess that you start to get, like, to the deep stuff. So yeah.
So he's so early in the major arcana that meaning and direction maybe like a little bit of a tall order, a little
Yeah,
premature.
I feel about the magician the way I feel about, like, pages and knights. Like,
Mm.
they've learned some stuff, and they're very eager and excited, and they want to use the stuff, but they don't always have the frontal cortex required to use it wisely, right? And I also, for me, the magician can also be a trickster. The magician can be a mountebank. There's magic as in I don't know what to call it, real magic, but then there's also stage magic, right? There's, illusionists. And I feel like with the magician, there's always the possibility that that's what's going on. The
Yeah.
they might be, doing a little sleight of hand.
Okay. How do you do? I guess you're kind of looking at the cards around the magician or in relationship to the magician to kind of determine if this is like higher level magic or the kind of like fun for the sake of magic.
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Like I do think about it in terms of, the fool's journey kind of breaks down for me at various points, like that whole concept. But that triad of cards, the fool, the magician, the high priestess, I have a very clear sense of their relationship to each other. The relationship between the fool and the emperor, I don't know. I don't know. Like it's just that's different. But those three, I definitely feel like they're operating, they're offering a picture of the cosmos or of the world that all fits together in my brain.
How would you like break that down in the most Reader's Digest kind of way?
Well, the fool is, pure potential, absolute beginner, someone ready to walk off a cliff, which is awesome energy, right? Like we all need that sometimes. We all need to be able to just fucking walk off that cliff. And to trust, like it is a card that is about trust and surrender. I am going to trust that walking off this cliff is going to work out just fine. Like Wile E. Coyote until he looks down. I'm going to be taken care of. The high priestess is someone who is really interested in the higher things and the deeper things, like really not even necessarily in any way invested in the external world, but really, I think I said this before, knowledge for its own sake. Like this is about, you know, going deep inside the self. It's about, connecting with whatever you call God or whatever. Like, and that is a personal connection with kind of cosmic repercussions. For me, the magician is somewhere in between there where like if the magician knew everything that the high priestess knows, the magician would be a supervillain. Like
Mm,
or if the magician had access to everything that the high priestess has access to without the like life experience and without the wisdom, the magician would be a supervillain. Does that make any kind of sense?
I think so.
Like for me, the magician is very much about will, and that will is very self-centered,
Okay. Okay.
which that's not a value judgment. I mean, supervillain talk is a value judgment, but like there are times when we need to, make things happen for ourselves, make things happen in our own lives, and that's perfectly cool. But like I said earlier, like there are times when that might be a little shady. Like that might be, it might be the product of, you know, knowledge and craft and, but it might also just be a trick. That said, knowing how to pull a fast one, knowing how to pull off, an illusion on the stage in Vegas, that also is a skill, right? Like that involves knowledge and craft. And, some of my writing as a freelancer, it looks more like that
Mm,
than it looks like, art.
yeah. Yeah. So that there's a lot of like how, or, for the person receiving a magician card, it doesn't. maybe we don't need to jump to like, oh, great, like what I want's coming and like my magic is strong. It's also how, what is your sense of responsibility around this process? Like, who is it for? Is it just for you? Is it for you and your community? Is it for you and your family? Is it for you and the earth? Um, yeah, or is it just like how much of your ego is here wanting to see how strong your will is?
Yeah, and like that is, it's totally contextual. Like, you've hit on a couple of things here. I have a friend for whom I have drawn the magician like 8 million times. And at this point, I'm just like, I can't tell you anymore about this card. You are magic. You have to accept that. Like, just please recognize this in yourself. But then also, nobody escapes a tarot reading with me without having some sort of social justice component. Like there's going to be a point where I ask about, your values and how your actions align with your values and like what are you doing for your community and there's you're never I don't have any patience anymore for spirituality that doesn't have a justice component and that isn't connected to the world.
Yeah. Yeah, good. I bow to that. I celebrate that. And, when you're reading tarot in bars, it's like harder to
Sure, for sure, for sure.
yeah, bring that up. Not always, like I've done it and I've also felt like, yeah, this is a 20-minute reading and uh based on like the questions I'm getting or like what the person is interested in, I feel like that element is unfortunately lacking. Um and yeah, like a short reading isn't the place to enlighten someone on that front necessarily. And now that you're kind of shifting your work, it's almost, I imagine you get, or that you have increasingly gotten more and more clients who are the kind of clients you want to work with, who are interested, who are already asking themselves those kinds of questions.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the other nice things about sending everybody, who works with me a nice long PDF is they can sit with it, like it doesn't just go in one
Yeah.
ear and out the other. Like they can, and I at this point I offer, questions you might want to journal about or like, things to do next with this, new information you've just received. And for sure, people who have worked with me for a while or who have come to me recently, they they know what they're in for. Like they're gonna get some kind of assignment. Like, they're gonna be asked once again what they're doing for their community, they're gonna be asked again if, they're serving the higher good. Like that's gonna happen.
Your postmodern witch moniker probably helps too a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. And in terms of what I've put online, like you can't look at much of what I've done without seeing that that's
Yeah.
part of the project, I would say.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I suppose it's not entirely true across the board, but as I kind of journeyed into this place of witchiness or thinking about myself potentially as a witch or not, or what did that mean? One of the things that made it, because I think it was just like kind of confusing. It wasn't something I thought about really before, and I didn't have a lot of exposure to any kind of like, I think I was always interested in mystical, esoteric stuff, but I didn't have anyone to hold my hand or kind of be a mod. I didn't have models in my life for that. And so seeing more and more that like folks who do identify as witches having a more radical or liberatory stance and taking that as like part and parcel of identifying as a witch made it all the easier to kind of say like, yeah, that is, it's not just like I think like being a witch because it looks cool and it's kind of badass and like, you make magic and have cool rocks and candles. It's like, yeah, how do we organize our lives and our communities in such a way where the spiritual and the political and the communal and the collective all start to intersect? And I feel like that was a place where I did find examples of what that looked like. And you certainly are one of them. And that's marvelous. Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, Starhawk is, one of the models here. I mean, she has been in environmental activism that has been built into her work since the 70s. Amanda Yates Garcia, she, her mother was part of Starhawk's community. Like, I don't think she actually worked with Starhawk, but with Reclamation. And, Amanda would go to anti-nuclear rallies, and it was absolutely intertwined, part of the same, experience. I belong to a UU church now, a Unitarian Universalist church, and you can show up there without any kind of spiritual belief at all, but you do need to be committed to social justice. Like that's the bedrock.
Hmm. Yeah. You mentioned that you had the magician on your altar and you've been working with the magician. Will you talk a little bit about what the magician is bringing to you or inviting you to do, or what you want to do with the magician?
Well, the magician was on my desk because, and traditionalists are going to freak out right now, but at any given point, I have 3 or 4 Smithwaite decks in various stages of missing cards floating around my workspace. I always have a full deck, but I just, things happen, I lose cards. And then they just kind of float to the surface, and the magician floated to the surface pretty much when I was embarking on, my latest venture. I had an image of Baba Yaga on my desk, and the magician turned up, and I was like, okay, you can hang out with Baba Yaga. Like, and that to me at that time was a reminder that like I have to trust my magic, and that it also that it's okay to make money from from doing this. Like I need
Mm,
to not be shy about that. I need to think about, you know, the value of my time and my knowledge, and I need to think about money as, an exchange of energy. Um, and the magician really helped me like trust that I could do what I wanted to do, but also to be practical about it.
yeah. Is there like, how did, I'm curious, I want to like drill a little deeper on that. Like, is it the magician standing there in their sovereignty, or the magician as a reminder that it isn't just like the time you put into your work or the way that the product turns out at the end, but it's also the magic that you bring to what you're making, which is some like has another value too. I don't think it's easy to like be like this magic costs this much money, but
Right.
more of a reminder like, and maybe this is a nice segue into your work as a freelancer, because I think writers are generally devalued, they're undervalued, they're underpaid. Freelancers for publications are great because you don't have to pay anyone on your staff. I mean, you don't have to pay them to be on your staff. You don't have to give freelance writers benefits. You just sort of farm
Hmm.
out these stories for them. And for a freelance writer to pick up like a new story when you're not working on like the same beat all the time necessarily, it's a bit, you have to go, you start from nothing, you go do interviews or you read a book, you're a book reviewer as well, and you take copious notes when you're book reviewing. I've done that. Book reviews take an incredibly long time, actually. And or I found them like quite arduous to do compared to what I would get paid for them. Um, yeah, so just like the world around us doesn't place, it's like everyone needs writing, but they think it's kind of easy, or they don't
Mm.
understand how it's like, oh, well, it's easy for a writer to do it. It's like, it's not easy for me, but it's easy for them. And because they don't do it that much, they don't really know how much goes into it. Um, this is becoming a rant and not a question, but maybe I'll just shut up and see what's coming up for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting a lot of good points. I mean, one thing that I have found, I know a lot of artists, like, visual artists. I know a lot of musicians. I know a lot of graphic designers. Um, and they get asked to do work for free all the time too.
That's true.
But
That's
the
true.
the special thing about writing is that literate people think that they can write. So they think that there's not really any special skill attached to writing. So, there's that. I have been incredibly lucky in a few ways. One is that I have a spouse who is a tenured professor at a university, and this has given me the freedom to pursue a freelance career. I had a career in marketing and book selling before I became a freelancer, so I had uh, a lot of contacts, and I was very lucky in that. And once I got into an organization like Bitch or Women's Review of Books, which you're not going to believe this, but feminist not-for-profit publishing doesn't pay a whole lot. Like, I know you're shocked,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but still, that was the kind of writing I wanted to do. And once I pitched something and wrote something, I could come back, right? Like, they know that I can do this. You know, Writing book reviews for Kirkus Reviews is, steady work and has been for years. The pay is a little bit better than it is for feminist not-for-profit publishing, but I get a lot of free books. And, if I encounter a book that I love, I can say to someone else, I would like to interview this author, or I would like to review this book. So, there are perks that make it worth keeping. Also, I love my editor and we're friends, and it's cool. I also write back cover copy for Harlequin,
Yeah, that's awesome.
which it is awesome. They are an amazing company to work for. They're just the nicest and the best people, and they have Rupert Murdoch money, which
Okay.
is complicated for me. But it pays really well. Um, and that work would be an example of work that feels a little more like the magician as stage magician, as Las Vegas illusionist. Because the job there is, I get a romance novel, I read it. Within 100 words, I have to explain why this romance novel is different from every other romance novel, but also will deliver exactly what you want from a romance novel. So that doesn't feel like art to me. It's satisfying and fun in its own way, and it's steady work and it pays well. But like that to me is more like, three card Monte, or
Hmm.
that feels like maybe, when I finish a piece of work, it's like nailing a skateboard trick you've tried a million times, and this is the first time you hit it. Like, it's not art, it's not magic, but it's fun.
Yeah, there's like a formula you have to totally constrain yourself to, and then you bring in like the magic pops and sizzles to create the newness.
Right,
Um,
right. Like yeah, there is no, I mean, one of the things that I study is folklore, which is also a very formulaic
Mm,
genre of writing and storytelling. Um, but I don't know anything. I mean, I read mysteries, I read science fiction, I read fantasy. I don't know anything that's more formulaic than romance. Like it absolutely has to hit all the right beats and it has to have a happy ending. Like that's non-negotiable. So, my job is to say, hey, this book is new and exciting and it's exactly like every other book you've read before. So, you'll love it. And that's not art, but there's some craft
yeah,
involved, I guess.
that's a interesting distinction. And yeah, so you've been like established already writing in multiple modalities in a number of different outlets and recently started up two Substacks that I know of, Postmodern Witch and then Croning, which I'm especially interested in as a woman who just turned 45. Um,
Uh-huh.
and so yeah, you have the Substacks going, and then you've added on the zines. Um, and I want to stop on the Substack really quick and just kind of ask, like, this is a new phenomenon. I feel like we're in this like rising height of, you know, creators in this particular delivery device
Mm-hmm.
producing their own content and creating their own audience and having like easy built-in mechanisms in the interface to get paid for it. And so I'm wondering how that feels to you, having worked in kind of traditional media and moving into this space. What are your feelings and thoughts?
Well, I actually decided to start the Substacks to support the zines. The zines
Okay.
are really, I mean, I don't want to say one is more important than the other, but that's the thing I really wanted to do, like print on paper zines. Um, but the Substack is wild. On the one hand, it's awesome because any money that's made, it's mine. Like, obviously Substack skims a little off the top, but like, you know, it's not like I'm selling something for other people. I'm selling something for myself. And in terms of, you know, just working in the internet economy, it's so much better than, say, trying to sell tarot readings on Etsy. Like it's much better. There are tools to create community. And it's been pretty exciting. On the other hand, I'm the only person creating content. And if I want to keep people subscribed and subscribing, I got to keep doing it. I can't at this point. I mean, there might come a point where I could say to somebody, "Hey, do you want to write a guest post?" But there's no payback in writing a guest post for me right now. Like that is not a thing of value unless you just really want to write something, um, and get it in front of people. But so it's kind of this weird um yeah, it's a weird combination of awesomeness, but also a lot of pressure. And
Yeah.
where I am at any point in the day, differs. And I've always loved selling stuff. I've loved, ordering stuff, like ordering books or ordering music that people buy. Like I love to share the stuff that I care about, and I want to see it like get out to other people. So, this is very gratifying to me, but I can see it has real potential to be, a dopamine hit that I rely on, like
Yeah.
that might not be sustainable. I after I appeared on Amanda Yates Garcia's podcast,
Which is where I
I
heard
sold
about you for the
right,
first
and
time. Yeah.
I sold a lot of stuff, like, and that was awesome, and I knew that that was not gonna happen again anytime real soon. Like I knew that I couldn't, like I had to capitalize, if you will, on that audience. But it also just, I'm also trying to balance like, paying for, extra storage in, like trying to balance like the cost of keeping this ship afloat, or just even the cost of printing versus the cost, like versus what I'm making. And, I also want to be able to pay people who contribute to the print zines, because I believe that, creative people should get paid for their work. Right now they get, contributor copies. So it's, but it's exciting, and it's more exciting than working for somebody else, I guess. And I will say that, like I said earlier, like I don't have to worry about paying the mortgage, right? Like that's gonna happen. Between my husband's work and my steady work, we got that covered. So I don't have that kind of pressure to like make Substack profitable, but I would like to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And the zines, I've ordered a couple of those. You've done a few that are related to the Wheel of the Year. I have your Samhain guide. You have an in bulk guide coming out, I believe, that you've been talking about. And then you started a Croning series of zines, and the first one was Baba Yaga, and I have that one as well. And I also have a little something in my business called Mystic Messages, and they're like tarot poems, and they're small, they're made with like typewriter. They've been typed on a typewriter and reprinted, but there's something, and I'm curious about your thoughts on this, like sort of the sweetness of the tangible, the thing that you can hold, especially after writing a lot of stuff that appears mostly on the internet. And this feeling of like having those tangible, substantive things kind of spreading out across the world and tucked away in different bookshelves. And what has that been like for you? And why was it important? And how's it kind of feeling as you start to share them more?
It's lovely. And I'm from the 80s, so I was in my, well, I'm from the 70s, and I was in my 20s in the 90s. So I know from zines, and had that experience, way back when. I will say that my initial impulse to start doing stuff in print again is a product of AI. Like I know that as a writer,
Mm,
anything I put online is about to put me out of work, right? Like it's training the robots to do my job. Um, I feel like tarot reading is something people aren't going to want robots to do anytime soon. Um, and just the idea of, I think of it almost, and this is maybe a little hyperbolic, but as like samizdat passed around by like, in secret in the Soviet Union, right? Like it's like under the radar, like, mimeographs of material that we're passing around. Um, and but as it has turned out, like especially with Croning, like I don't think I could have gotten a bunch of people together to like say, hey, you wanna put a bunch of stuff on my Substack? But like making a zine together was a lot of fun. Like, and it was a project that me and a bunch of people that I know and love and have known for a long time, and some new people were able to like work on together. And that was awesome. And I don't think that would have happened for, you know, a blog. Um, and we're trying to work with the fact that there are physical products involved. Like we've got swag, we've got trading cards. One of my dreams is to have a flexi disc of, a song by one of the women who works on this project with me. So, we're trying to make the physical aspect of it, fun and worthwhile and different. And at the same time, our words are going to the people who want them, and they're not going into the machine.
yeah. Yeah. It's almost like you get some of the benefits of Substack of like everyone who's reading your work has elected to be there and continue to hear from you, whether they're paying you or they're not. And this one, yeah, there's just like the internet can't get it. Um, it's only for the humans. And we have fingers and we touch the product and we open it and
Right.
feel it. And it's like we're not burning our eyes with screens for another hour or whatever, which is also beautiful. And I'm looking forward to more of them. They're really lovely, and I recommend folks who are listening to this to go buy some more. My final question is about magic and aging because you
Mm.
are working on this Croning project, and I know, aging is on your mind, and my mind, and many other people's minds, and especially,
Sure.
it's unique for women, and it's probably unique for men too, and for people of uh, non-binary genders, of course. But yeah, do you see any connection in aging or croning and magic? Am I trying to connect things that maybe aren't connected?
No, 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 there, I definitely see a connection. I just, I just turned 53 in November. And I also just finally achieved menopause, which, there was a long time where I would go 9 months, 10 months without a period. And oh, then I'd get a period and like I'd start all over again.
Because it's
And
supposed to be a year between period.
yeah,
You have to go a year without having one before they'll declare you
right.
menopausal.
Menopausal. So, or you've reached menopause. And like for a long time, I thought that I would have like some sort of major freak out when I hit that mark, like this is the beginning of the end. And, there are elements of the experience that sort of feel that way. This is definitely, I've reached a time in my life where Mother Nature has said, you no longer get moisture in any part of your body. Any moisture will have to be artificial. You're going to have to like buy it and apply it yourself. And yeah, itchy ears. I did not know that itchy ears were going to happen because my ears, the inside of my ears are drying up. Like it's a wild scene. But as it has happened, it's been a real relief and a release. And a lot of it is just not giving a shit anymore.
You think that's the
There's
magic?
I think that is the magic. I mean, that's a big part of it. That's part of it. It's not the whole magic. I
Mm,
mean, they're becoming invisible is a thing. I mean, it definitely happens. And that is both a drag and also a superpower.
yeah,
Um, but then there's other stuff happening that I don't know how to define. Like I don't know. Yeah, I can't describe it other than that I've just been more creative than I have been in decades. Um, like, we've just talked about some of the stuff I got going on, and like it's just, it's a lot of stuff is happening. I'm doing a lot of stuff and I am less anxious about all of it. And I will say a couple of external things happening for me are that my son, who has a lot of challenges and has gone through a lot of stuff, is 17 now and in a great place. And like that has it's I can't say how much aging has freed up brain space and how much that has, like, I can't quantify what's going on there, but that's been huge for me. I also just recently, within the last year, got diagnosed with ADHD, which, is radically underdiagnosed in people assigned female at birth. Um, and just having that knowledge has, you know, really helped me like figure out how to do my best work and how to be less anxious. And so there's just a lot of stuff going on, but there's definitely, I feel like, and I say this because of a lot of the other women I know my age, that like we're just stepping into a new place that feels, new in a good way.
Yeah, and it seems to carry with it the sovereignty. Like you
Yes.
get more of that as you age, and the knowing thyself part, especially if you've been a self-reflected person like after 50 years, like that will get you somewhere. And
Right.
that self-knowledge, I think, make again can like make your magic stronger, however you define that magic. And I also think it's quite beautiful that what you're creating, one of the things you're creating now, is something that like was a big, I mean, I think zines have always had their place, but really, came into the world in like the 80s and the 90s. um and that, it's you're coming back to it now and getting to kind of like play with that. And do you feel like a younger part of yourself alive in that work?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. I also, at the same time, like, if I think about, like, one of the things that has made Croning happen is me just letting go of my control freak side. So I'm working with other people on this project, and there are times in the past where I would have edited this like to every detail, and now I'm just like, you're all cool people. I love you. We love working together. What do you want to do? And what I envisioned initially for Croning was very narrowly defined. Like, as you mentioned, the first issue was dedicated to Baba Yaga. And I imagine this as almost being like a little book for people aging, or a guide for people aging with Baba Yaga as a guide. And that would be the whole thing. And, I realized, you know what? My friends are coming up with some other ideas that are not part of that. And this is actually cool, and it's better, and this is funner.
Nice.
Yeah.
More fun.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, that is one of the nice things about zines. They are, they're cheap. Like, they're pretty easy to produce. I'm not a genius with InDesign, but I'm, learning it, and it gets easier every time I use it. I also insist on using a union publisher, or a union printer, which makes it a little more expensive. But I think my guy's giving me a deal. So
Good.
yeah, yeah.
They know that they want to be friends with the witch in the neighborhood.
Well, yeah. Also, a witch who is active and a leadership member in the Democratic Party in Michigan.
Nice.
Yeah, if you're a Democrat and you can't produce anything that isn't union printed, so
Yeah, and you're
yeah.
in a place with like a history of strong unions, which
Oh
is,
no, not where
oh
I
no.
am now.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, I'm in central Michigan.
Okay.
Yeah, like if I were in southeast Michigan for sure, but no.
I'm in
Uh,
Texas where unions are like barely
oh,
get to exist. I mean, there are some, but
right.
we don't grow up
Yeah, I
like with our parents in unions that much?
yeah, I grew up in Akron, Ohio, the rubber capital of the world, and
Mm,
my great grandfathers actually organized the rubber workers. So like, yeah, and
that's
yeah,
awesome.
Union strong.
Always. Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the show and having this conversation about the magician and magic. And do you want to let folks know what kind of offerings they should look for from you? How would you like people to connect with you and enjoy your work these days?
Well, Substack is a great place to start. I have Croning and Postmodern Witch, and I am about to put out something for Imulk, a zine, like, that's a guide to that holiday, and the second issue of Croning is being put together right now. So, and that will be uh, devoted to Sheila Nagig, who's a fascinating figure. But yeah, that's probably the best place to find me.
Beautiful. I will put links to all these things in our show notes. And I hope folks who are listening will continue to enjoy the great work that you're doing. Thank you again for being on the show. It's so good to talk with you.
Hey, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Big thanks to Jessica for joining me for this conversation. You can find links to Jessica's work in the show notes. Please check her out. You will be very, very glad that you did. Now for a creative prompt to work with the Magician card. It's pretty simple. I invite you to grab a candle, ideally one where you can see the flame. Grab your journal and something to write with, and then find some quiet space to be alone with yourself and your thoughts. Then light your candle, ideally with a match, if you have matches, and just notice and connect with the energy of that spark of the match coming into flame. Just kind of notice, pay attention to, observe, appreciate how there was no fire and suddenly there is. This is how magic works. This is how creativity works. And then take a minute or two and just sit and gaze at the flame. Kind of let your gaze soften. Just watch the flame undulate, move. Notice if it gets kind of frenetic. Notice if it's kind of smooth and gentle. Just witness. And then when you feel settled and collected, begin to write. Maybe let yourself write for 10 or 15 minutes. And I want you to explore the same question that started this episode. What does magic mean to you? How do you define it and experience it? What feelings do you have about it or do you want to have about it? And what kind of relationship do you want to have with it? So just you can write, ruminate, reflect on any or all of those questions. And then as you get to the end of what you're writing, when you feel like you're getting to completion, when it feels complete for you, go back and read over your words. Ideally, read them aloud. And then at the bottom of the page, write a short invitation to magic and just tell it how you'd like to work with it. So, for example, I might write, Magic, I welcome your visits into my life. I'd love to get to know you better and see what's possible when we collaborate. And then say your invitation out loud as well, and finish with this phrase, so be it or better. That's how we let the universe know, like, we want it, we declare it, and we'll take it, and we'll also take even more if the universe wants to provide in that way. So you're going to say, so be it or better. Or if you have some other version of like concluding a ritual or a declaration that's connected to your cultural lineage, of course, please say that. And then after you conclude, extinguish your candle. And if you like, let me know how it goes. You can always reach me at hello@typewritertarot.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, or send this episode to a friend. And if you're liking this conversation overall, the kinds of conversations we're having on this podcast, these explorations of magic and creativity and tarot, and how we can bring these things into our lives more fully, then I invite you to join the Creative Magic Collective, which is a group experience inside a growing community where we're doing this exploration in a structured and supported way. The Creative Magic Collective gives you 12 months of support. It also gives you my workbook, Tarot for Creative Spirits, where I have thoughtfully developed a journaling prompt for every card in the tarot. The workbook has art in it. I've designed the space on the pages to help you think and work through things. Some prompts are just straight writing prompts. Some are drawing or sketching or collaging or making a list or kind of mapping out a plan. So there's a variety of different things, different ways to engage. And the whole thing is meant to help you become more familiar with the tarot archetypes through your own experience, which, in my opinion, is the best way to learn, and to also take you on a journey of self discovery. Because remember what I said at the beginning, that self knowledge helps us make stronger magic. So the more we know ourselves, and it's an ongoing project to know ourselves. And I'm not even sure there's a definitive self that we can get to know. We're changing and evolving. But our parents, our schools, our experiences, we've received a lot of programming in our life. And there's this work we can do to get to know the self that exists aside from all of that, underneath all of that, separate from all of that, and to bring that out and to give it more life and to give it more space. So when we do that, our magic gets stronger. This is what I have found to be true. So the book is designed to help you do that. You can buy the book by itself. It's going to be ready in March, and you can go on this experience all by yourself. But I don't know why you would want to, because we've created this beautiful community of other people who are doing the same journey. Except what's cool is that everyone's going on the journey differently, because you might, Susan over here pulls a card, this card on this day, and she journals about that prompt. And then Maria over there has pulled a different card and she's journaling about something else. And their journeys continue as the tarot guides them to the next prompt. I've also found doing the book this way that you get shown the prompts that you need to work with in the right time. So you get to experience magic regularly, which is the way I like to live. So you get that. But then when you're in the Creative Magic Collective, we have a monthly group call, a support call, where we can integrate and process some of the things that are coming up in our reflections. And then once or twice a week, there are also journaling sessions online. They're just 30-minute calls. We hop on, we journal together. I play some music. We close with a little conversation and exchange. It's actually a smaller group where we get to know other people on the journey with us a little bit better. And we celebrate along the way. You also get access to all our workshops. You get to come to our workshops for free. You get the recordings. It's just a great thing. And I think if you're looking to learn more about tarot or develop a stronger relationship with magic, or if you're going through a transition and you really want to stay grounded in who you are, this was made for you. And I invite you to check it out. You can go to our website, typewritertarot.com, look for the Creative Magic Collective. You'll find everything you need. There's links in the show notes, of course. But if that's a lot, if you're still just getting to know me, just go to typewritertarot.com, check things out, sign up for the newsletter, come to our next Creative Coven. They're always free. Check out our mystic messages, explore, say hello. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for listening. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in and letting this podcast flow into your creative and magical life. Until next time, take care, have fun, and keep creating.